Please stay on mute, everybody.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. I see there are several that are coming in. Welcome, welcome as you're entering into the space. We're so grateful to have you. So grateful to have you. So grateful to have you. We see you here, we see you. Ecumenical Women welcomes you. We welcome you into this sacred space, into this moment, into this time. You are in the right place. If you have come for Girls on Fire, Part 2, you have come to the right place. If you're here to talk about how we can link up to end gender-based violence, you are in the right place. If you are an ally, an activist, or a holy agitator to end the violence, you are in the right place. Welcome. Welcome. Thank you. This is what we're talking about today, how we can end this, end the sexual violence, end the violence against women, against men, against all the vulnerable. We are here together. So we're so grateful for your patience in this virtual space. And again, we thank you for being here. Girls on Fire Part 2, an intergenerational conversation and a call to action, ending gender-based violence in faith communities and the public square. Here at CSW, the 65th session of the commission, this is the conversation as it is part of the main theme. We are talking about how girls are advocates and they are leaders too. We're talking about how women's leadership in the public square, we're talking about how we can advocate both for gender justice and to advocate to end gender-based violence. We have a phenomenal panel with us today. We have our own girl advocate, Claire Jackson, who is back with us, and we're so grateful for her presence. We're thankful even now that we have Tawana Brown with us, Reverend Andrea Alexander. We're grateful for Bishop Eduardo Martinez Diaz, and we're grateful for Dr. Ulysses Burley, all of who are here with us to have this conversation. This is a village conversation that we're having, and so we're grateful. And before we go into their introductions, formal introductions, again, we are here with our co-organizers, Ecumenical Women at the United Nations and the Working Group on Girls. And so I'm bringing you greetings from the EW table, the Ecumenical Women at the United Nations, and we're hoping that Victoria Edmonds, as she is here, or if Ms. Adwa is on the line, we are hoping that they would bring greetings from the Working Group on Girls, and just so grateful for you if you would just say a word of greeting.
Sure, I will. I was unable to make it this afternoon, but as being a member of the Working Group on Girls, we are really thrilled to be a part of this and hope that it will be an enriching and learning session for everyone. So WGG is on board with Ecumenical Women in this fight for justice. Thank you.
Blessings on you. Thank you, Major Edmonds. We're grateful for you. And for our co-sponsors, the National Council of Churches, You Be the Cure, the Lutheran World Federation, ACT Alliance. And last week, we had our anchors, our co-sponsors, also the Samuel Dewitt Proctor Conference, which is just a justice league and a movement for justice with African-American clergy and lay leaders. We are grateful for you and for the Pathfinders Justice Initiative and Connect New York City. We are grateful for all of you being our co-sponsors, not just with this initiative, but within the fight. So today is Thursday, and every Thursday in Black, we come together in solidarity. And Reverend Nikki Ashwood is here from the World Council of Churches just to anchor us a moment to speak to why we come together and what exactly Thursdays in Black is. Reverend Nikki.
Thank you, Reverend Dion. Good afternoon, everyone. Good night, good evening, good morning, good howdy do to you all. In one sense, it is an honor and a pleasure to be here to speak to the issue. But yet, one cannot help but recognize that the reason we are gathered is that yet another year during the Commission on the Status of Women, the issue of sexual and gender-based violence is a very present reality amongst us. If we were able to look around the room right now, we would note that there are more than 3 women in this room, which means that for every 3 in this room, at least 1 has fallen in the category of the 1 in 3 women who faces sexual and or gender-based violence throughout their lives. I know that yes, 1 in 10 men face abuse, but I also want us to note that approximately 17% of women who face violence are killed by family members each day. 137 women are killed by family members each day. So when we stand for Thursdays in Black, we are standing for a resistance movement that says the violence must end. And with Ecumenical Women, the World Council of Churches invites you to join us in this campaign, to join us in this movement, to challenge the status quo round about us, to say no to violence, no to rape, and an end to abuse of any form. With Ecumenical Women, we invite you to pause. Remember those who have suffered, whether they are victim, dead, or survivor. We invite you to pray that the survivors will be able to find life in abundance, but more so to pray that the abusers will become human once again, because acts such as those could not constitute humanity. We invite you to post your pictures when you are wearing Black on a Thursday so that the world might get interested. And don't worry about Black being an issue that raises questions, because that offers the space to start the conversation. And last, but by no means least, we invite you to take the pledge that says you will stand up for justice and equality to end the scourge of sexual and gender-based violence. I've taken the pledge. Ecumenical Women staff members and representatives have taken the pledge. Have you? Will you join us? Thank you.
And thank you, Reverend Nikki. Thank you. I neglected to say and to remind us that we are using our interpreters today. So we're grateful for Spanish and French interpreters today. If you are here and in need of interpretation, please select the language of your choice, either French or Spanish, and mute the original. We're 2 channels that are available, French and Spanish. Again, thank you so very much. And please, we're asking for our panelists to speak slowly. I know for me, for sure, when we're passionate about something, it is difficult to speak slowly. Now, ACT Alliance is one of our sponsors, our co-sponsors, and we have one of their girl advocates, who has created a video to speak to how girls are standing up both for gender justice, and girls are on the front line calling for the end of all forms of gender-based violence. Would you hear now Varushila Kadam?
My name is Rishali Kadam from Mumbai, India, and I'm 25 years old. There are about 1.8 billion young people in the world, and half of them, about 900 million people, are adolescent girls or young women. However, the continuous onslaught of patriarchy, violence, and conflict disable young women and girls to be visible. Every young girl experiences patriarchy firsthand in her life, or maybe just perhaps toned down versions of it at some point in her life, somewhat like a patriarchal hangover. In my region of South Asia, young girls and women live under patriarchal systems that have existed for hundreds and thousands of years. Every day, girls and women in South Asia and all over the world rebel, fight, and capture their rightful spaces in society. And these are only the baby steps that a young girl or a young woman experiences on her path to leadership. Women's leadership has shown ridiculously amazing results during the pandemic, but be it as a president or a prime minister of a country, as frontline workers, or as grassroots women's organizations that have worked tirelessly for the past 1 year working around women's rights and women's healthcare. Young girls have undertaken one of a kind inventions even during the pandemic as well, from inventing low-cost ventilators in Afghanistan, or to taking tuitions of little girls, educating them and making sure that education is accessible to them even if schools aren't. And that's the beauty of being a woman. We can do anything. Young girls and women's experiences make them natural leaders to make space for other women, including trans women and LGBTQI+ communities. We can be inclusive, intersectional feminists, providing constantly evolving perspectives to gender justice and gender equality. We can surely lead. It is important for young girls to educate themselves around gender-based violence advocacy, not only to ensure that the next generation is protected and bond-free, but to also ensure that the destroyed dignities of victims and survivors of the past are built back again, piece by piece. Young girls can make the gender-based violence dialogue relevant and truly intersectional, non-binary, and not just black and white. We would be including the grays. We will also be including LGBTQIA+ communities who suffer gender-based violence every single day all over the world and are also deemed illegal. We will also include elderly women who are often left out from the gender-based violence dialogue. We are young girls and women, and we can lead.
It makes my heart glad to know that we're not in this alone. And all around the world, we have girl advocates. All around the world, we are celebrating the fact that girls' voices need to be heard. All around the world, we are celebrating those partners, allies, holy agitators. And some of them are even in this room right now, in the Zoom room right now. I'm going to introduce our panelists. And because one of our panelists does need to go first, because we only have her for a short time, I want to read these names and just sort of set us up. As we have heard and we see why we are here, this is meant to be a conversation that is going to talk about allies, the risk takers, those who have been journeying with us, our brothers and others who have been journeying with women and girls on this on this quest and on our mission to end gender-based violence in all its forms. We also are going to hear from our girl advocates, from their experiences, as well as some of the suggestions that's coming from our girls that we need to hear. The generational conversation is a must. And then, of course, our brothers who are coming alongside our bishop, who we will ask him about these questions as it relates to justice, as it relates to peace and security, and how the landscape has changed now because of COVID. Peace and security looks differently, and so how his experience will bring us an understanding, and how he, as a risk taker, what he has experienced as well. We're looking for our brother, Dr. Burley, who has experiences in the is an activist for those in the HIV and AIDS community. We will hear from him around how in which he's seen some of the stereotypes show up, and again, the risks that he has taken as an advocate. So Claire Jackson is a girl advocate. She is the president of Girls Learn International, an organization dedicated to supporting educational opportunities for girls worldwide. And each chapter of Girls Learn International supports multiple schools throughout the world, and their contributions go directly to help the school and their students. They plan their activities and events throughout the year and raise awareness about helping girls worldwide and supporting human rights. The Girls Learn International members are eligible, and they attend CSW like they are now, and they participate with the Working Group on Girls and others. Tawana Brown is also a girl advocate and the vice president of Girls Learn International, a senior in high school in Essex County, New Jersey, and she'll be attending college this fall, and as an intended poli-science and African American Studies double major. She, as I said, was the VP, the vice president of Girls Learn International, and has been advocating and promoting domestic violence and promoting the end of domestic violence and awareness about teen abuse, dating awareness. She's also a domestic violence survivor and is grateful for the opportunity wherever she can to speak about the awareness and the need to continue to advocate. Our Reverend Andrea Alexander is the Associate General Secretary, Action and Advocacy for Justice and Peace. She leads the National Council of Churches in this initiative to reverse the rising trend of mass incarceration in the US. And before her move to the National Council of Churches, Reverend Alexander served as the national coordinator for the Office of Immigration and Refugee Services with the American Baptist Home Mission Societies of the American Baptist Churches. She has led denominational efforts around advocacy for comprehensive, humane immigration reform, and addresses human rights and religious liberties issues related to the diaspora of the ethnic peoples of Burma, as well as the diaspora of the African Americans and all of those in the diaspora. She has a history of working with ecumenical and interfaith government, grassroots entities such as the UN and the World Council of Churches and the others. She's a lecturer, a preacher, and she's been throughout the US and abroad. And she's not only an advocate, but she is my prayer partner, sister, and friend. So grateful for her and for her presence. Bishop Eduardo Martinez Diaz is a bishop in the Lutheran World Federation and is a coordinator of Waking the Giant Initiative in Colombia. His work is aimed to strengthen the capacities of churches and faith-based organizations to contributing to sustainable development. And since 2018, his initiative works in partnerships with the churches and faith-based organizations. Training religious leaders for advocacy on development issues is one of his main tasks. He is a theologian. He is a leader in his community and beyond, promoting peace and justice. Dr. Ulysses W. Burley III of You Be the Cure is a founder of You Be the Cure, a consultant company and the intersection of health and human rights. He's a native of Houston, Texas, and he has studied biology and Spanish at Morehouse College, School of Medicine and Public Health at Northwestern University. And I want to say also that he is the program director of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. He has served as the program director of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, strategies on HIV and AIDS, as well as served as the director of HIV and AIDS programs at Heights Pharmacy. And currently, he is an ambassador for the COVID-19 Prevention Network, the faith initiative to connect with diverse faith communities to share evidence-based information regarding COVID-19 and vaccines and the antibodies being developed for its prevention. He trains in medicine and public health. He is dedicated to a vocation of justice, social justice, advocacy through faith and community-based initiatives. Again, his experience is vast and worldwide. We will post his full bio on our website as well as on our Facebook page. But I want you to know that his personal mantra is we all used to be somebody else. What's most important is that we're always working to be better today than we were yesterday. He says that we should treat people and not just the disease. So we're going to hear from these. I want to turn first, though, to Reverend Alexander. And we're going to turn first to you because the work is so important. And we want to first hear from you in terms of not only your personal experience of gender inequalities, but and confronting gender-based violence. But what have you seen is the most one of the critical areas? We were talking about your work as the intersection between race and gender, this legal system. We know how the disparities affect us in various communities, but would you share a little bit about that? And then how and what keeps you on fire doing this work?
Thank you very much, Reverend Dion. And it's hard because, our background with church and culture. I'm going to dispense with all the great accolades. I love everyone. It's so great to see you and Reverend Nikki, who I haven't seen in a while, in these roles. And I thank you for this opportunity. And this panel. So there is this, one of the flaws, I would say, a major flaw in America, and we see it all the time, is that we tend to not understand the intersectionality of issues. We think we can address and deal with, people want to talk about racism, for instance, but not talk about poverty or its impact on various other policy issues. You want to talk about gender issues, but then not address racism, class issues, and how these things intersect. And that term intersectionality, coined by Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw over 30 years ago, simply means that as we're addressing systemic problems in the world, none of these things sit in isolation. You can't address gender without addressing racism, class, and other kinds of intersecting circumstances. And you can't address those circumstances without how they all kind of come together. And as she puts it, they're not a sum of their individual parts. So you have to look at these things in this prism kind of lens. And as an African-American female with a background and profile that it incorporates, having grown up in a working class family, dealing with both, poverty and then getting educated and moving into middle class and moving on. Those things impact the way we see and understand things. And one of the greatest places, I think, where we see that huge inequality, disparity, misunderstanding is the criminal legal system. There's some things that are even the ways that we even define violence. You know, violence is still predominantly considered physical violence. Did they hit you? You know, and did it hurt? I mean, you know, all these various ways that we even define violence. Violence is something that can rip apart, tear, destroy one's emotional understanding themselves and society's understanding and impact on how we are viewed. Even the most recent example, the most recent televised and publicly articulated example is the massacre that occurred, for instance, in Atlanta, where we had 8 people killed, 7 of them women, 6 of them Asian. And the perpetrator who says that this was based on a sex addiction and not a hate crime based on race. But no one is addressing or digging into the fetishization of Asian women by white men, which is racism. And so even given his explanation that it is a hate crime because of the target based on his understanding of what those women's roles were, impact on his life. It also centers him in whiteness and it centers him in his whiteness in the way that actually gives him a defense. And so these ways that we don't understand, deal with the intersection, we start everything with the foundation and base that then everything else is an other or demarcation from. And that base is, in the United States, and I would say internationally, is white European male, wealthy. And if that is your foundation and base and everything else follows, then everything is going to be flawed in the way that it's viewed and how it's addressed. And we are not going to make major systemic impact on any of these things until we're able to address that intersectionality. I wanted to give some examples and statistics around incarceration in women. And again, not just defining violence, but even defining what is a crime. So let's use the example of Marissa Alexander, who several years ago was incarcerated for several years when her husband threatened to hurt her, and to defend herself and her children, she had a gun. She shot the gun in the air to get him to stop and to push off. He actually admitted that that's what happened. But she was arrested and incarcerated for attempted murder and, negligent use of a firearm and so forth. We take the example of here in the United States, the big war on crime that started in drugs in the 1990s. It was the first time there was a major uptick of women being incarcerated. And it was because women were being used then by men to traffic their drugs, which is by coercion, by threat, by relationship. We look at sex workers and how we define crime again. Sex workers is usually the target upon the one who is performing the work, but not the man who backs her, not the man who is paying her for services. And those kinds of statistics and the ways that women and girls then largely began to lead to large increases in mass incarceration. So for instance, between 1980 and 2019, the number of incarcerated women increased by more than 700%. 700.
Wow.
And interestingly, in the last few years, the statistics of women, Black women and Latino women are decreasing, but when you went up 700% and you go down, you're still way ahead, much larger, higher numbers than you should. When it comes to incarcerated girls, African American and Native girls are more likely to be incarcerated than Asian, white, and Hispanic girls. The placement rate, meaning putting them in some placement facility, is 43 per 100,000 girls. But the placement rate for Asian girls is 3 per 100, white girls 29, Hispanic girls 31. African American girls are more than 3 times as likely as their white peers to be incarcerated, 94 per 100,000. And Native girls are more than 4 times as likely at 123 per 100,000. And there's only, that shouldn't say only, but 15% of those, of young people who are incarcerated, youth are incarcerated are girls, but they make up higher proportions of those incarcerated for lower level offenses. So 36% of incarcerated youth, 36% of youth incarcerated for status offenses such as truancy and curfew. Again, when girls are supposed to be nice and compliant. And so even if boys are engaged in these activities, the girls are more than half of the youth incarcerated, for instance, for running away. And over 1/3 of incarcerated girls are held for status offenses for violating the terms of probation. So again, gender identity and understanding has a major impact in the ways that our criminal legal system engages and impacts our women and our girls. And you asked me about this, is like, what kind of things can we do? What do we need to do? One of the things you do is what you all are doing. I am so sorry that I won't be able to see all of this, and I'll go and look at the video because I really want to hear the girls and women who are on your panel who are already doing this work. But do what you're doing. Speak out, be advocates, join forces. I actually recently heard a term, and it's not new, but it was one of those things that really hit me that I loved, that there is power in collective rage. There is power in collective rage. And we as women and girls are constantly told not to show our anger, not to express ourselves in a certain way. Your rage, your anger is your power. Hold it and use it. And stand firm when someone tells us that we don't have a right to be that way. And also, again, what I'm already seeing is engage with those who are the ones who are directly impacted. And that whole issue with rage is also this way. We talked about I mentioned earlier, the fetishization of Asian women. Also this way that society has this way of using distortions of women in our existence as weapons against us. Black women being called Jezebel or Sapphire. You know, again, the fetishization of these of Asian women. You know, this way that, you know, men have decided to use these terms and others pick it up. That is a form of violence that we have to fight against. And quite frankly, fight against, but also really have a different look at and define ourselves. I can't get into it here, but I have a whole new take on who Jezebel is. If you read the Bible and really understand who she is, she's actually a woman that we could admire. If we think about her power, her voice, and her strength, and the ways that she used that strength to make a difference. And the collaboration is extremely important. Thank you very much.
Reverend Alexander, see, that collective rage right there, that collective rage, there is power in our collective rage. I want to say thank you so very much. And I know that you have to leave early, which is why we wanted for you to go first. And we're so glad that you did, because you set us up talking about the fetishization of Asian women, but also how the commodification of our bodies in general usually sort of lends itself to how we are, how the victimization happens, and also the violence. And how, again, how the violence can occur, not only physically, but emotionally and psychologically. We want to go straight to our girls right now, but before you leave, tell us, you told us to speak up, be advocates, engage with others. But in terms of accountability, We want to talk about how do we address not getting the kinds of accountabilities from those who are perpetrating the violence. What sort of actions can we take as the faith community, working collaboratively with others? What suggestions do you have for us?
Again, that kind of varies. I consider myself an advocate, activist. So there are times you have to take things to the street. And I also believe strongly, even with the faith in the church, I want to get, this is a faith-based World Council of Churches. Our churches have to do better. I found out recently in another event that, and I don't remember if this was the Black church or the larger church in general, that 70% of the leadership in church are men and 70% of the membership and participation are women and 16% of the leadership is women. Is ridiculous. And I know that that's difficult for many of us because we come from a variety of faith communities. But that accountability comes from how we're learning and understanding all of these things in our faith communities. And we have to speak out about it. This COVID experience, if it hasn't taught us anything, is that the world does not have to be the way we thought it had to be. Because all the things that they said we couldn't do before, how many people were told that they couldn't work from home before they wanted to? And all of a sudden they had to, and we made it work. There are ways that we're going to have to re-envision. My term right now is radical prophetic reimagination. And so reimagine, and you might be the only one out there. I'm not going to go into all the details, but we had one situation with a policy agenda that took place in DC a couple of years ago, and pretty much the entire faith community supported it. I found myself partnering with 3 organizations that were led by and for former incarcerated women. They were all Black women. We spoke out against it, and people were kind of side-eyeing us. And then after it was all over, people were coming and saying, thank you. And now they want to know where we are on any issue before they step out, because our stepping out gave others the power. We had to step out first by ourselves. But it then gave others the okay to say that they too could step out. And it's not easy.
That isn't. But you have given us some encouragement. So thank you. Thank you so much. And again, the prophetic collective reimagination, that we are going to be reimagining how the world can be without rape and without violence. We're so grateful for you, and thank you so much for your time, your expertise, and we will be sure to keep you connected with the movement on this side. So grateful for you. Thank you. Thank you. We want to hear now from our girls. Claire Jackson and Tawana Brown, we want to hear from you. We want to hear from you, not just because you're not just on display here today. What we really want to hear from you is to be able for both of you to tell us this, to tell us why is this important for us, for us to have this conversation with you. Why is it important for allies and advocates and holy agitators to work and to listen to girls about this? We know that you've been doing some work, but tell us a little bit more about your work to end gender-based violence, and of course to achieve gender justice. But you're speaking, Tawana, as a survivor, and Claire, you're speaking, both of you, as vice president and president of your organizations. Tell us what keeps the fire burning for you to do this work, and how can we join you in it? Tell us what you're doing, how we can join you in it, and we need to hear more from you and about the work of advocacy that you're already doing.
Yes, thank you so much for having me again, and thank you for having my vice president, Tawana. We're super honored to be here. I can start. Hi, everyone. My name is Claire Jackson. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a senior at Verona High School, which is located in northern New Jersey, and I'm president of my high school's chapter at Girls Are International. I first want to start off by thanking you all for being here and for giving me this platform to share my advocacy. As president of my chapter of Girls Are International, an international organization working to empower and educate middle and high school students to advocate for human rights, equality, and universal education in the US and around the world, it is my job to set the agenda for our chapter. I have an incredible vice president with me today, Tawana Brown. She's also one of my best friends and as a survivor of domestic violence. She has spoken at multiple events, raised awareness, and overall been an incredible inspiration to me. I'm so excited to have her by my side throughout this event and throughout life. And I'm so happy that you all will be hearing from her today. When she first told me that she was a survivor of domestic violence, I knew our chapter had to focus on it this year. We decided to create a week of domestic violence awareness where we would educate about domestic violence and advocate for survivors, also allowing survivors to share their stories. We planned on creating an atmosphere that had not yet been created in my high school, one that truly cared. Hearing my friend's story was an honor and opened my eyes to the truth of domestic violence. Survivors are living in silence. She was sitting next to me in class for years, and I had no idea what was going on, and it broke my heart because she's not the only one. 1 in 15 children are exposed to intimate partner violence each year, and 90% of these children are eyewitnesses to this violence. However, as prevalent and pressing as domestic violence is, my chapter decided to add another element to our week of domestic violence awareness: teen dating abuse, another extremely important issue that is rarely talked about. 1 in 3 high school students experience either physical or sexual violence or both by someone they are dating. Girls are being abused and no one is saying anything. They're walking the hallways of my high school. They're sitting next to me in math class. They're playing sports. They are being abused and my high school has remained silent. And sadly, my high school is not the only one. Millions of teenage girls are being abused by their partners and are forced to remain silent, or when they do speak out, there is little help that is offered to them. This is not taught in our sex education classes. We sit in that classroom and no one tells us about domestic violence, sexual assault, or teen dating abuse. And yet almost every girl in that classroom either knows a survivor or is one herself. I knew that this culture of silence in my high school needed to change because I knew that there were dozens of survivors, if not more, who had never been given the chance to share their story. My high school cares more about our GPAs than our health and well-being, and with the help of my chapter, we planned on changing this. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw an increase in domestic violence as states and countries were telling us to stay home in order to stay safe. Millions of women and children were not safe in their own homes. For some, the stay-at-home orders were simply not safe. Additionally, COVID-19 caused my school to be all virtual for the first few months of the school year, so our week of domestic violence awareness had to be virtual. We used social media and our virtual classrooms to educate and raise awareness. Of course, this was challenging at times and felt like it wasn't working, which happens a lot during advocacy. However, one day during the week, we held an open conversation with staff, students, and a guest speaker from the National Council of Jewish Women on teen dating abuse and domestic violence. Although we could not hold this conversation in person, we still accomplished a major goal. We created a safe space in our GLI chapter for young women and men to speak about issues like domestic violence and sexual assault without fear of judgment or scrutiny, something that had previously not existed in my high school. And it may not seem like a lot, but to have 30 teenage girls sit on a Google Meet call and tell me that they feel safe in the space we created brought me to tears, because if I've learned anything as an activist and as president of my GLI chapter, it's that it's the little things that matter. Gender-based violence is a major issue that often does not receive the attention it needs, and although my goals include being an advocate at the highest level, one lesson I have learned is that sometimes the most powerful things are the small ones. Being there for those 30 girls, receiving texts saying that I had created a safe space for them and they felt like they were valued and appreciated is one of the greatest accomplishments of my life. Our chapter is holding a Sexual Assault Awareness Month throughout all of April, where safe space groups will be held weekly. These groups are important because it is the one time when a group of girls can come together and share their experiences without fear of judgment. It is the one time for a lot of these girls where they hear, "You are worthy, you are irreplaceable, I am here, and I believe you." My advice to other girl advocates is advice from the Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer of the American Civil Liberties Union, Amber Hikes. Take up space. If it doesn't exist, make it. Push your elbows out and take up space. Thank you.
Thank you. Tawana, can we hear you and your story?
Thank you for having me. Like Claire said, I am the vice president of GLI at my school's chapter. I'm going to share a little bit about my story and how I got into advocacy work. Domestic violence is a repetitive form of abuse that happens in intimate relationships. Domestic violence has no face. It is something that affects millions of women, men, and children of all races, ethnicities, sexual orientation, religion, and culture. It is something that is important to understand. It is not just physical, but it could be emotional, mental, and sexual. This epidemic has caused the lives of so many people and has left permanent scars and struggles for its survivors. I am a survivor of domestic violence. Behind the smile is a girl who has once experienced significant trauma and neglect, a girl who had suffered from severe PTSD and depression, a girl who had a lot of insecurities that strived from her past, and a person who has never had stability in their life. My father was always in and out of my life. He was my abuser. He would show his love by beating me and destroying all of my self-worth and confidence. Growing up, I had to protect my sisters and my mother, but at what point was I protecting myself? No one should have to watch their mother get severely beat every night, and no child should fear their parents. A home should be every child's safe place, but mine was school and being around my friends. But did my school know, and did my friends know? No. The physical abuse only happened to my mother at first, and then he started beating my sisters and I. I never understood why this was happening to us. I always thought that something was wrong with us, or that this was something that we deserved. A lot of people have this misconception that if one is being abused, they should leave. But unless you are experiencing it firsthand, you would never understand how hard it is. Abusers make you feel like you need them, that no one else will care for you the way that they do. My mother was blinded by the abuse and dependent on my father, so for her, this was all she knew. And my father was her safe space, even with everything he was doing. My mother would constantly make excuses for everything he did. She told us that he would only hurt us because he loved us. But it took several years until I realized that love is not abuse and love should not hurt the way we were hurting. This made me question my purpose in life. If anyone ever truly cared about me, and what could I do to fix it? I had no one to go to. My sisters, who are younger than me, were looking to me for comfort. I hated seeing them hurt, and I had to be strong. I had to reassure them that everything was going to be okay. But the truth was, I knew it wasn't. It took nearly 4 years before I realized that something had to change. It wasn't until I was faced with death that I realized that my living situation was far from normal. The abuse got so bad that my father was going to kill us. In September of 2015, my brother, sister, and I ran away from home, and I called Child Protective Services. A 12-year-old calling DYFS changed my life completely. My DYFS placed us with my grandmother, and with time, the wounds from therapy in my past started to get easier to cope with, but they would never be erased, and it's something that I would never fully recover from. My experience has been my source of motivation. I am who I am today because of my past, but not in spite of it. I find comfort in writing and comfort in my voice. Domestic violence is more times than not a death sentence for many women and children, and that death sentence was supposed to be mine. I am passionate about shedding light on the gruesome truth of domestic violence. I stand resolute in my truth as I take back my voice. I am the creator of my future, and it is important for women and girls around the world to know that they are too. Creating safe spaces is the best way to advocate and spread awareness on domestic violence and teen abuse dating. Creating a space where young girls and young women know that their voice matters and their story is powerful, and that their story does not start nor end with gender-based violence. My work with GLI has been driven because of my past. It allows me to strive to be the best advocate that I can be and to create the biggest safe spaces for not just myself, but for everyone who cares to join in. Domestic violence is something that should be talked about more often. Domestic violence and teen abuse dating should never go silent because the person sitting next to you could be experiencing the same thing. Thank you for your time.
Wow. I cannot thank you enough for your time and for your story. And before we go on to say anything else, I want for you to know something, Tawana, that you did not deserve what happened to you. And we are here and thank you for sharing and trusting us with your story. And as a survivor of rape and intimate violence myself, I say thank you because you helped us to be seen. And you are not alone. I want to ask the two of you this, and for Claire, for your work, and for both of you who are doing this work, we want to thank you so much because without you, we wouldn't see what the next generation is even capable of. But here's one question, and if you have questions, please put your questions in the Q&A so that we can make sure to ask Claire and Tawana questions. And if there are any questions, even for Reverend Alexander, we can get them to her so we can get them answered. And of course, then to our brothers who we will hear from coming up next. But you mentioned creating the safe space. You said, Tawana, that domestic violence doesn't have a face, and you're absolutely right. It does not. But also, it sometimes looks like the person who is closest to you and when it comes. But how do you all create the safe space? How do you create safe and strong, brave spaces for people to share and for people to know that it's okay? Either of you or both, one after the other, please. Both of you, we want to hear from you.
I can start. I know that when Tawana and I were talking about our first week, it was sort of, Tawana's been so open about her story, but so many other survivors have never even had the platform, because when Tawana first told me her story, it was actually at a GLI meeting a couple years ago. And I really think that part of establishing safe space is we had an expert there who knows a lot. We had our advisors of our chapter who are really great teachers that have always created safe space for students. And I think it was difficult at first. You could tell when people first came on that they were questioning if they could really speak. But I think after you have you have a few stories being told, I think people really start to realize that there is no judgment here. We're not gonna, go tell guidance about everything. We're not going to post on social media what happened to you. We're really just here to listen. And if that means you want to come in and talk about a new TV show you watched, or you want to talk about a funny thing that was happening on the internet, you can talk about it, because we just want to hear you and know that you are heard and that you are always worth it and that you are irreplaceable. We are listening to you. We want to hear from you. And I think it's really that you just sort of have to make the time for it. We posted, here's a Google Meet link, here's the time, here's who's going to be here. Come, you can turn your camera off. You don't have to say anything. You can stay for 5 minutes. You can stay for the whole 2 hours. You can just come and be there. And whatever that conversation, whatever form it takes, will allow it to take there, because it's what you need, not what I need to hear. So if Tawana, you want to add anything?
I would also just agree that it just comes with starting the conversation. I know when I was going through my situation, you would have adults telling you like, that's not okay. This shouldn't be your life. But I didn't have that peer-to-peer conversation. I didn't have somebody that was my age letting me know, like, I've been through this and you're going to get out. You're going to get out and you're going to succeed. That is not your story. That is not your life. Like, you can break the cycle. You can recreate the narrative for yourself. So it wasn't until I started to become comfortable in sharing my story, because once I found that there was power in my voice, I started to notice that a lot of other young girls specifically started to reach out and say, hey, well, this happened to me, or I'm so inspired by you that I think I'm going to write about what happened to me. I'm going to go tell my parents. So it's about starting the conversation and changing the language that we use, because a lot of the times us young people, we know what we want to talk about. So I know Claire and I, all of our meetings, the first thing that we make sure that we do is make sure that every single one of our members, they're being heard and they're being listened to. What do you guys want to learn about? What do you guys want to talk about? What are you guys comfortable with sharing and what are you not comfortable with sharing? So it creates that atmosphere where everybody knows they actually do care. They actually do see me. I'm being recognized and I'm being acknowledged. And that is very powerful because a lot of the times we are silenced. And unfortunately, not everybody knows how to deal with that. Some people, start to internalize that and feel as though because they were silenced by one person that they're no longer able to maximize their voice or, create a space where they are standing firm in their truth, saying, this is what happened to me and this is what I want to do about it.
This is invaluable for us to be able to sit and to hear from you. And let me tell you why. Because we as faith-based communities, it was intentional to collaborate with the working group on girls because they're not a faith-based organization. And I will be the first to tell you, and I'm not the only one, but we don't have this conversation in the church. And we need to have the conversation in the church. So it would be great to have you all to come and tell us. And now you have the ear of the faith communities. And what I would like for you to do, we need to create safer spaces in church, in the church, in synagogues, in our mosques, in our faith communities. What are the ways in which you would say to us in faith communities, like, tell the church people, how do you create this safe space? What should we be doing? And then again, they're adults. We've been in this thing for a minute and we're a little jaded. We're also wounded and speak sometimes not from our scars, but from our wounds. And that is not helpful. What would you say when we're thinking about creating safe spaces? And sometimes we assume that they're safe and they're really not. What would you tell the church? How can we create them? What would you tell the church that we should do?
I can go for this one because I'm actually spiritual and I just reconnected with the Lord and I've been on my own spiritual journey. For a period of time, I did steer away from the church and going to church members as an outlet, essentially, because I felt judged. I know a lot of the times, and it is a stereotype, that, church people, they may feel as though, that they're holier than thou and that they can have, they have the ultimate say. I would just say go about it as being as open-minded as possible and going into every situation, just, clear-headed and not making assumptions about a person's life or why they may be in that situation or why they're looking to go this route instead of another one, and just listening, especially for young kids as well, for children and teens. We are what we see, we are our environment, we are what we hear, and things like that. So if you go into a space and you automatically feel like everybody is just watching you and everybody has all their eyes on you and they're judging you, automatically you're going to become more reserved and timid and say, oh, okay, well, I'm not going to speak on that, or I'm not going to say something about that. So it's just honestly about creating an atmosphere where everybody feels comfortable, and you can't assume that. So then it goes on to the dialogue, having open communication. And it doesn't have to be about violence. It could be about, what did you eat for dinner last night? Or what's your favorite cartoon and stuff like that. That creates the relationship.
Yeah, to add on to that, one other important part of our safe space groups that we've done, and a lot of in our club that we've done, is you have to educate people at first, because I know that with all the statistics that have come out about 97% of women, I mean, I know so many girls that my friends were like, wait, am I in this 97%? I thought I was in the 3%. And, it, for a lot of people, a lot of girls, they just don't know because it's what we're taught. If a guy catcalls you on the street, oh, that's a compliment. No, it's not. And so it's just sort of opening up the conversation about, this is what the signs are, this is what it looks like, and this is how we're here to help you. And I know a lot of the times in the safe space group, one of the main questions that we always get, or we get throughout this whole thing, is, well, what can I do to help my friends? I'm not a survivor, but what can I do to help my friends? And what I always say is, just text them that you're there. Just say, hey, checking in, want to go grab Dunkin' Donuts, want to go get a coffee, sit somewhere, FaceTime, I'm here, let me know if you need anything. Because if they are a survivor, they're going through a lot of adults right now. They're having adults tell them how they should feel. They're having adults tell them these difficult combos. They just need a friend. They just need another teenage girl who says, listen, I'm here. We can go shopping, walk around the mall. We can do something. Here's a funny TikTok. I'm here. You know, you don't have to do these really difficult things, because sometimes, like I said, it's not those big things that they need. You just need, I'm here. And that's one of the main thing with our safe space groups, is just opening up that we are here. If you want to talk to us, you can talk to us. If you don't want to talk to us, perfectly fine. Just please say, you know, don't live in silence, because that's not what you're supposed to do. And so that's always my thing is, I mean, Tawana knows that I text her all the time saying I'm here. But I tell the members, I'm here, like truly, I'm always here. And please don't ever feel like you can't say something, because I will never judge you. And I think it's just that constant reinforcement of it, and that building of a relationship of, let's develop that we have a relationship, and then we can go deeper with that conversation. It would be my advice.
Thank you for that. And I know we're going to have some more Q&A that's coming up after we hear from our brothers, and then we're going to come back to you. But I want to ask you this one last thing, Tawana. I want to say to you, sometimes there are triggers. I know for me as a survivor, there have been things that have come up on the news and things that have happened. Sometimes we just don't have a good day, and there have been triggers. What would you say? How do you deal with it? How have you been dealing with COVID? How have you and others within the organization have been dealing with the triggers, the vicarious trauma that you've seen from the news, all of these things? What would you say to us about how we should, what should we do to help survive that?
The first thing I would say is definitely check on your strong friends, your strong family members, your strong community members, because I know for myself, a lot of the times I do get those texts from Claire and I'm like, you know what, actually, I'm not okay. My whole schedule is booked and I'm just filling it on top of things. I'm gonna do this, and this to get my mind away from everything else that's happening in the world. The beginning of COVID was completely like a shock for me, because my safe space is school. I like to escape. I like to have an outlet and not be so consumed in my day-to-day life from home. So when I was told I have to stay home for this period amount of time, I'm like, well, what am I supposed to do? So through that, I just started to continue to find things that I could get active and involved with. And while they are great and while they are educational, sometimes I have to take that step back and take some time for myself and say, hey, you know, I need to work on this. I'm not completely 100% and I can't give 100% if I'm not there myself. I have been working really closely with my therapist, who is amazing. She's not only my therapist, but she's my spiritual advisor. So that has been very good for me, to have somebody that I'm spiritually connected with, and then also somebody that can work as my therapist. So that has been my outlet, and that has been my source of, you know, navigating and balancing my triggers and, you know, dealing with everything going on with the pandemic, and then everything going on with marginalized groups, because it has been a heck of a year. So I would just say really, really check on the people closest to you that you look at as they're so strong, they're dealing with everything so well, because you never really know what they're going through.
Thank you so much, Tawana, really. And thank you, Claire. We're coming back to you because there are a few other questions that came up in the chat about sexual gender-based violence, and particularly in Sunday schools and church schools and the forums, and some suggestions about how we can, you know, recreate our curriculum so that we can involve these kinds of things and challenges. So we're coming back to you for sure, but I'm so grateful for you and for your stories and your time. So now, I mean, we need to talk to our allies, our other holy agitators. Bishop Martinez, we are grateful for you. And Dr. Burley, we need to hear from you. So here's the thing, where we are so blessed to know that we have allies in you, but these are risks that you've had to take. Yeah, they have been risks that you've had to take as standing up for women and girls, standing with women and girls. I'm not speaking for us, but walking with us and journeying with us. We're so grateful for you. What have a question to the both of you and your work. How have you experienced that being a risk taker? How has that affected you? And what got you into being an advocate for not only gender equality, but ending gender-based violence? Bishop, would you like to go first, or Dr. Burley?
Sure, I can begin. Let me begin by thanking you, Reverend Boissier, and to everyone who has been a part of this important discussion. One of the ways in which I show up as an ally is to make sure that I don't take up space in places where the voices of women and girls should be prioritized. So I will keep my comments brief. It's said that in the late 1800s, abolitionist and author Frederick Douglass said that it's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. And he said this while talking to white slave owners about the immortality of slavery. But I think his quote is relevant in this conversation about gender justice. And it's absolutely relevant in my own exposure and introduction to gender equity, which quite frankly began in my home. I grew up in a two-parent household. Both of my parents were relatively successful, but it was clear that my mother was the breadwinner. My mother was the one who had the most education, and my mother pretty much made all of the hard decisions related to our family. And so very early on, I got an example that might have otherwise been countercultural to the gender dynamics present in society in my own home. My mother would go on to pass away from breast cancer, leaving my father widowed, and he was left to care for a son and two girls. And so because of that, I was then left as the oldest to care for my two younger sisters. And I tried to convey the same level of care that my father showed for my mother and for my sisters, So very early on, I was plaiting hair and I was playing with dolls and doing whatever else I needed to do to make sure that my baby sisters were well taken care of. And so I tried to carry those experiences with me throughout my life in my relationships with other women. And I hold those experiences with me now today as I father two little girls of my own. And so it really started in the home for me. And I believe that's a part of the work that we as allies have to do, is begin to mentor young boys to grow up and to be great gender allies. Professionally, for me, this work really came as a result of my work around HIV and AIDS. So I'm a clinician by primary training, but I have done the work of HIV and AIDS mostly in an advocacy space, but also in a faith-based environment. And in doing the work, it became clear that HIV was not just a medical disease, but it was also a social justice imperative, in that there were all of these intersections. Reverend Alexander mentioned the concept of intersectionality. Well, when intersectionality manifests in a public health space, we call them the social determinants of health. And so those are those social dynamics in which impact one's physical health. And so a person's neighborhood, their built environment, where they worship, where they learn, their education, their access to healthcare, and all these other things. And so one of the social determinants of health in HIV is gender, quite frankly, and more specifically, gender inequality and gender-based violence. HIV worldwide is impacting more than 39 million people. And of those 39 million people, more than half of them are women and girls. Even more than that, in places like the continent of Africa, where the HIV epidemic is the greatest burden in the world, more than 60% of all new infections happen among women and girls. And it's really on the basis of gender inequality, women's inability to access information about prevention and care because of gender dynamics. Most women are infected as a result of intimate partner violence. And so people who were very close to them, who lived in their own homes, who abused their agency in their homes and resulted in HIV transmissions. And so, here in the United States, we talk about Black women, particularly until 2008. The leading cause of death for Black women of reproductive age was HIV. And even though we've decreased that by more than 40% now over the last 10 plus years, Black women are still twice as likely to be diagnosed with HIV than white women here in the United States. So professionally, I realized that if I was going to be successful in tackling HIV as a disease, that I also had to be successful in addressing and tackling gender inequality as a disease in and of itself. And so that began to encourage me to be more vocal as an ally about gender inequality, how it intersects and shows up in public health. And so I've also championed issues around sexual and reproductive health rights, and as well as now COVID-19, where there might not be a gender inequality medically as it relates to COVID-19, but there's certainly a disparity socially in terms of the consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic, where women have disproportionately been casualties in the job sector, but also women have disproportionately been victims of domestic violence that has increased 300% in some places in the world as a result of shelter in place and stay-at-home orders that have gone over the last couple of years. And so this work is personal for me in the sense that it's the right thing to do. And because it's the right thing to do, I don't consider it to be risky work, as you've couched it. Sure, there have been sacrifices that have come as a result of standing up for what I believe in, questions about my character, generally from other men, but I consider those to be good encounters in that I could identify the people in which I did not want to be associated with moving forward as a result of my activism and my advocacy for these issues. And so I'll stop there, but to say that, as a Christian, as a person who defends human rights, women's rights are human rights. And I believe that it is the mandate of men and boys to be advocates of those rights.
Thank you so much. And even on this day of remembrance for the victim of slavery and transatlantic slave trade, thank you for lifting the ancestor and abolitionist Frederick Douglass, even in this space. And we thank you for that work and for the intersections that you have seen, really. We'll come back to you because we have one other question for you, but Bishop, the waking giant, please, would you respond to the same thing, but also to share with us about your world, especially because the landscape of peace and security for women in the age of COVID-19 has so changed. And so how does that impact your work? And speak to us, of course, about your allyship and how you show up.
Muchas gracias. Voy a hablar en español. Agradezco esta oportunidad, sobre todo de escuchar las voces de mujeres jóvenes que tienen el valor de hablar de sus duras experiencias. Y esto nos desafía.
Más despacio, por favor, so we could get the interpretation. Huh?
Okay, I will do. Escuchar estas voces de mujeres jóvenes que cuentan sus historias es muy importante. ¿Cómo ha cambiado la situación de las mujeres por la pandemia? En el caso de nuestra región, la violencia intrafamiliar se ha aumentado drásticamente. En Colombia, tuvimos más de 80,000 casos de violencia intrafamiliar durante el año 2020. Y feminicidios, casi 300 casos de feminicidios. Así que la pandemia ha profundizado esta situación. Desde el rol que tengo coordinando esta iniciativa, Despertando al Gigante, vimos la necesidad de que esta información sobre la situación de violencia de la cual es víctima niñas y mujeres tiene que ser documentada, conocida, tiene que ser informada ampliamente. Por eso, en red con otras organizaciones religiosas, hemos estado realizando en este mes una campaña de difusión de esta información. Elaboramos un documento con cifras que hablan de la situación de violencia en nuestro país sufrida por niñas, mujeres. También este documento recoge información sobre cuál es la situación real de posibilidades de participación de las mujeres en la vida pública. Y este documento ha sido circulado a personas que han estado participando en varios de los eventos paralelos en esta comisión sobre el estatus de la mujer. Yo quiero decir que el trabajo en red es supremamente importante. Por eso me parece clave que aquí se está mencionando la necesidad de que las mujeres y las niñas trabajen en redes, pero también darse cuenta que otras redes de organizaciones, en este caso, organizaciones e iglesias basadas en la fe, que estamos comprometidas con este tema, que realmente nos interesa acompañar esta realidad, porque es necesario transformar esta realidad que nos afecta a todos, porque es deber de nuestras iglesias trabajar por transformar esta realidad. Solamente quiero mencionar, porque he escuchado mucho esta necesidad de que generemos espacios seguros. Solamente decir que en el caso concreto de la iglesia nuestra, la iglesia luterana en Colombia, estamos asumiendo ese reto de hacer de nuestras iglesias espacios seguros, espacios de escucha para las niñas, los niños, para las mujeres. Hasta ahora estamos en ese proceso y no siempre con las iglesias es fácil, porque hay que cambiar la mentalidad, hay que superar prejuicios que tenemos, hay que superar estereotipos que tenemos acerca de las mujeres, las niñas, de los roles de hombres y mujeres, pero hay que comenzar a abordar estos asuntos. Y eso es lo que estamos queriendo hacer desde la red que tenemos aquí en Colombia, una mesa interreligiosa que aborda los temas de los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible, y estamos ahí trabajando por estos temas. Entonces, solamente decir que estamos dispuestos a seguir colaborando, a seguir poniendo nuestro esfuerzo para cambiar estas realidades, que es urgente superarlas, porque si no eliminamos la violencia contra las mujeres, entonces no es posible el desarrollo. Muchas gracias y volvemos al panel.
Thank you so very much, Bishop, for your work. And so I know the time we're coming close to our end time. We started at 2:07 because we wanted to make sure that we had our interpretation features correct and up and running. And so I wanted to redeem 5 more minutes of our time. So we will end at 3:35 because I want for our girls to get the last word before we're finished. I want to ask this question of you. You have both shared how your work and how you show up in this movement with us in your work. What would you say, both of you, as allies? I'm going to ask our allies first, and then go to our girls. I'm going to ask our brothers first, and then we're going to go to our girls, for they will have the last word. I want to ask our brothers, what is the thing that helps you keep fire lit? We're talking, this is Girls on Fire here, right? And the fire meaning that we are to stay lit for gender justice and gender equality. What keeps you burning? How would you say that what's the first step for allies to take, for holy agitators like you all to take so that they can continue doing this work. And if you are speaking to brothers or allies who are yet not convinced, what would you say to them?
For me, it would be to relinquish power where possible. And so I say this from a personal experience. I realized that it wasn't just enough for me to talk the talk, but I also had to walk the walk. And so there are many times in my life where people don't necessarily see my gender equity activism in play, but I've taken it as a personal responsibility to make sure that even when people aren't looking, that I am doing and upholding those values that I hold true to myself. One example is more than once I have been offered an opportunity to either be an adjunct professor over a gender studies course at a university or to assume a position in an organization around gender equality because of my work, but more or less because of my gender, and even more specifically because of my access as a result of my gender privilege. And so I was able to recognize that and say, hey, I appreciate the offer. And while I think I could do the work and do it well, I also understand that there's a woman somewhere who trained in this work, who was born to do this work, and is supposed to do this work. And I would be taking that person's position. And so I'm going to decline. And instead, I'd ask if you allow me to make a recommendation of a woman who would be better served in doing this work. And so things like that, that won't necessarily get quantified. Nobody will read about it or see it, but it relinquishes power that patriarchy has given me, and it redistributes that power to create a more level playing field in society. And so, I think that that's one small way that men and men who desire to be allies, who possess power in boardrooms and courtrooms and operating rooms and houses of worship, to begin to level the playing field, to relinquish some of that power and redistribute it to women, where women can prosper and grow. And I think we're beginning to start to see that movement, but the pandemic has set us back, certainly, especially as it relates to the economic workforce. And we're going to have to make up that ground. And so that means that it's going to take more allies who are willing to sit down, be quiet, and raise the platform so that women and girls might assume the power that they deserve. And so that's one small way of being able to do this work right where you are, with the privilege that many men enjoy today in society, in today's society, while not necessarily being versed in, academically gender equality or gender justice or gender studies.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Burley. We are grateful for you. Please put in the chat some information about You Be the Cure. We want to make sure to be supporting you in your work. Please put how we can do that in the chat. Padre, Bishop, how should we? What would you tell your allies?
Lo que tengo que decir es que es el momento para actuar. Es el momento para entender que si bien la pandemia del COVID es algo grave que nos ha afectado a todo el mundo, esta pandemia de la discriminación, de la desigualdad, de la falta de oportunidades para mujeres, niñas, la violencia, es una pandemia que nos ha acompañado por más tiempo que la del COVID-19. Y tenemos que luchar contra estas realidades. Y eso requiere cambios culturales, cambios de manera de pensar. Y nosotros como líderes religiosos tenemos la oportunidad, pero también la responsabilidad de llevar este trabajo, de ir adelante, ayudando a que nuestra cultura sea una cultura más incluyente, más respetuosa y que podamos superar fenómenos como el machismo y la discriminación que afectan nuestras sociedades. Y nosotros tenemos una oportunidad, pero también una responsabilidad para hacer que el mundo sea mejor para todos y todas. Gracias.
God bless you. Muchas gracias,
Gracias.
Padre. Thank you so very much for your participation. And my sisters, Claire and Tawana, we want you to give us our last words. After that, we have a video that we want to share so people can join us in doing the work. And we hope that the both of you will be able to join us in our collective work. We have some things going for 16 days of activism in the fall. So we're hoping that you will join with us to do that. But tell us the one thing that we should do. What is the first thing that when we come off this line, we should be doing? Talk to us. Give us our marching orders.
I can start. I would say educate yourself. You listen to survivors. I know something that gets me going every day is my phone background is actually Angry Women Will Change the World, because I truly believe that if you're not angry about this, you're not listening. So get angry, because if you're like me, you're not just fighting for yourself. You're fighting for your best friend. You're fighting for the girl sitting next to you in class or the girl sitting next to you in your office, because they're all around us and they're fighting in silence, and we need to amplify their voices. Fight for them. They need you. Don't speak over them, don't speak for them, but amplify their voices and remind them that you believe them, you're here for them, you support them, you love them, you think that they're irreplaceable and they're worthy, because they need us and we can do so much for them. So I would say get angry, because when you're angry, you're going to do better. And take up space. Never stop talking, never stop trying to fight for this, because I know it can be exhausting, but it's a fight that we have to fight, and fight it for your fellow sisters because they need you. So that would be mine.
And
Tawana?
going off of what Claire said, when I look at my advocacy work, I look at my grandmother and my younger sister. Because of just that gap. At some point, there was a disconnect between the generalizations that led to another cycle of abuse. So I am very much motivated by creating that space and that atmosphere where I let my younger sisters know that, hey, I am here with you, I am fighting for you. And that does not mean just my siblings that I'm related to, but that's all girls, all young women that I come in contact with, because their voice does matter. And we are the only transcribers of our life. And we are essentially of how our story ends. So I would just say get active and continuing that conversation in all spaces, all environments, all atmospheres.
Thank you. You've given us our charge. We're so grateful for your voices. We're grateful for Vishwala's voice from ACT Alliance, and for her video. I believe she is on today, but we're grateful for the voices of our girls, even in India where she is, and for you, both of you here in the States. We're grateful for all three of you and your voices. We're grateful for the partnerships that we have and the allies that we have. So grateful for you, Bishop. Grateful for you, Dr. Burley, and for Reverend Andrea Alexandra. And so deeply grateful again for all of you who have shown up today. We heard, we got our marching orders to speak up, take up the space. We're starting now, making room. And I want to say that your rage is your power. I know that Reverend Andrea would want us to say our rage is our power. And so we want you to know, Tawana, Claire, Neftali, we want you to know, Versace, we want for you to know, Vershali, yes, thank you very much for the video. Yes, thank you. We want for the three of you to know that we see you, you are valuable, and you are worthy, and that you are not alone. So thank you for this. And thank you all for joining us, for all co-sponsors for us today, and from the Ecumenical Women family. We are grateful for you joining us for this Girls on Fire 2. And as we close, we're closing with a video from Jean. Jean is the intern. Well, she's a former intern now, Jean Nangwala. She is the one who produced this next video, and we're so grateful for her collaboration, and we are grateful for you making the pledge. Would you join us? Make the pledge, the Thursdays in Black pledge today. Thank you. God bless you. Stay around to see the videos, and then please put your information in and stay in touch with us on our social medias to see what's next and how you can participate with us. Amen.
From generation to generation, we have witnessed the rise of violence against women, the rise of sexual violence, the rise of gender-based violence. This is not just a woman's issue, nor just a generational issue. We come together and say enough is enough. We commit to hear the voices of those who are hurting. We refuse to be bystanders. We work against all systems that continue to perpetuate violence. Thursdays together, Thursdays to amplify, Thursdays to pray, Thursdays to advocate, Thursdays to speak up, Thursdays in solidarity, Thursdays towards a world without rape and violence, Thursdays in Black.
I made the pledge.
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 Ecumenical Women at the United Nations invites you to partner with us
and the World Council of Churches Thursdays in Black campaign, a global movement for a world without rape and violence.
Every Thursday, we wear black as a global act of resistance, accompaniment, and solidarity to end rape and all forms of gender-based violence.
COVID-19 measures have exacerbated sexual and gender-based violence.
And our siblings suffer in silence all over the world.
We will not be silent.
We will not be silent.
Here is how you, your church, or your organization can partner with us.
Pause for a moment of silence on Thursdays at noon, your local time, to remember and honor those who have died at the hand of sexualized or gender-based violence.
Pray with us. We stand with invisible victims of sexual and gender-based violence.
We see you. We hear you. You are not forgotten.
Post your pictures and prayers, inspirations on social media using the hashtag Thursdays in Black.
You can pledge with the global community to end the violence in our lifetime.
Go to the website and make the Thursdays in Black pledge.
I made the pledge.
I made the pledge.
I made the pledge.
I made the pledge. I will not be silent.
I made the pledge, and I will not be silent.
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 I will not be silent. Will you join me?
I will not be silent. Will you join me?
Will you join me?
Will you join me?
Will you join me? Thank you. God bless you.